Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of This Uncanny Earth. It's your good buddy Spider here to entertain you for an hour. Rob is not here tonight, which he said he wasn't going to last week. I believe this is his camping weekend. I think he does different things, and I think this was the weekend he was going camping with his little boy, and so it's kind of like a family day for him. So instead, you have me. So, how's everybody doing? Welcome, welcome. It's a muggy day here in Ohio, super muggy. Um, it started off relatively cooler temperatured, and then it has slowly kind of risen and gotten thicker in the air as the day has gone on. So it's pretty gross um, today, but still, all in all, not bad. How's it going, Z-Man? Good to see you. Good to see James. Good to see Z-Man. I am changing things up a little bit with my tablet because I've been noticing that the past several broadcasts I've done have been um, kind of not so good with the Wi-Fi and things. I've had some weird problems with the feed, so I'm using the 5G. Oh no, the 5G on my tablet. I hope nobody gets any severe radiation poisoning from it. To see if I can keep a more stable connection. Uh, and go from there. So I'm doing pretty good, everybody. I got my drink, I got my topic, and I'm ready to go. So I have been playing a lot of Dead Island 2 on my Xbox, and if you don't know what that is, it is a zombie apocalypse game. And that got me thinking because I don't remember if we've talked about apocalypses in the past on this show. We've had at least one or two episodes where we've just gone through different apocalypse scenarios and things. But it's been a while. And I like going back and doing some of the classic stuff. I don't, Rob gets into more of the intellectual stuff, which is good. It's great stuff. I don't want to look down on it. Of course, intellect is good. But I'm more into like the gritty kind of the more Bigfooty UFO Bermuda Triangle kind of paranormal stuff. So so zombie apocalypse. It's a popular thing. It's been around a while. Like the idea of the living dead coming back and swarming the earth is actually a super old idea. Um, it talks about it in back in biblical texts. It talks about it how on the day of reckoning or whatever, there's going to be the dead will walk the earth and whatnot, and it's not so very clear. So it might not be zombies; it might just be people coming back to life. It should be weird, but it's been around a long time. Like there's been vampires, there's been a lot of different undead scenarios over the years, and the whole zombie thing has become really big in popular culture for quite a while. We've got Resident Evil, we've got Night of the Living Dead, we've got The Last of Us. Like a lot of these things we're going to talk about tonight, and try to gauge the viability of any of this stuff to see if any of it could actually, if could this happen at all. Um, we've got World War Z, we've got all kinds of things. So so let's get into it. What is the idea all about? The idea is there's some event, and we'll go over some specific ones and try to tease out whether it's possible or not. Some event causes worldwide reanimation of dead tissue. Yep, I'm going to put that up on the screen. A lot of legends and things. And almost lost my chain of thought. It's reanimation of dead tissue to get up, walk around, and have nothing more than base instincts, which are basically the need to procreate and the need to feed oneself. That's it. Um, but since they don't have a sexual drive, then the need to procreate is instead tied into the need to eat. So when they bite you, they transmit whatever it is that they have, and if they don't completely finish you off, then you rise yourself as a member of the living dead, which is another popular thing among things like vampires and stuff like that. Vampires have to, depending on what reference you go by, they have to either just bite you and inject something, or they have to drain you of blood and then refill it with that tainted blood that they've now ingested. But zombie stuff is different because zombies can just happen from a bite, kind of like the werewolf thing. But werewolves don't necessarily, you don't die. A werewolf isn't really classically undead. A zombie can bite you, and once it bites you, you're done. You're inevitably going to turn into a zombie. There are some instances in different bits of media of people who are immune and things like that, which is a popular hero story thing. But we don't know if that would even be possible if such an event were to occur. Now, the classic non-living dead, well, I guess you could still say living dead. There's in voodoo, they have the zombie, and the zombie is usually raised up by a unscrupulous sorcerer, or a bokor, as they're called, bokor. And they usually raise you up to do their bidding, to do things for them. And they have a different method of bringing you up that's not transmissible. It's like a one and done. They do it, and then when they're done, they let you, fall apart. But the most common scenario. Well, first off, before we get into that, is it even possible for a zombie apocalypse to even be a thing? Could that happen in reality? It's a sticky area because logically you think, no, not really, because once you're dead, you're dead. Otherwise we'd see things, like the chances of something coming back would be high enough that you'd see things walking around and doing stuff. However, there have been a lot of experiments over the decades with electricity, kind of not necessarily in like a Frankenstein's monster kind of way, but in ways that stimulate the brain and stimulate the nervous system to get a dead body to move around. And we know as well that the body can function for a certain amount of time without the brain technically being alive. We have a thing called brain death, where the brain basically ceases all higher thought and all major function other than just automated processes, and the body can go on. It's a lot of times it happens to people who are in comas, and they have to undo. Oh, yep, I'm going to get to that kind of stuff too. They have to get to they have to like undo the life support and things to let them go because they're not going to get better, which is a really tragic situation. But we know that the body can still function for a certain amount of time, and we also know that after death, the body, once it's interred, can still grow cells for a certain amount of time. There's still a certain amount of residual energy. They can still grow hair follicles and fingernails and things like that. Not indefinitely, but it can happen. So, theoretically, could a corpse get back up with enough brain function to even have instincts? I think it's a hard maybe, a very hard maybe, because if it was something that was relatively doable, you'd see it more often than pretty much never. Now, that being said, there are a lot of situations that happen that are kind of zombie-like. Of course, the infamous some years ago incident of a man in Florida who was on a drug called bath salts, which wasn't actually, you didn't take retail bath salts that you get in the store to put in your bath. It was like a cocktail of different things that was nicknamed bath salts. Although that led to a lot of funny jokes about, watch out, don't put bath salts in your bathtub. but he was like out of his mind, and he was basically reduced to a feral, savage beast. Basically, he was on a freeway. I don't know if he was driving or if he's just walking along the freeway, but he attacked somebody and chewed off their face in a real classic like zombie style thing, and they tased him like a bunch of times, and he just kept shrugging it off and kept on going. Like he was abnormally tough, abnormally just like, oh, and it's crazy. And that's not the only time that happened. That happened at least one other, possibly two more times that year. So, I mean, if any zombie apocalypse was going to happen, it would have been that, right? So we know now that drugs can cause this kind of thing, certain dangerous drugs. Um, and we have a lot of mood altering, and I don't mean necessarily just like the mushrooms and the LSD and stuff like that. We have a lot of legal, over the counter, mind altering drugs. We have antidepressants, we have stimulants, we have this, we have that, we have all kinds of things. Morphine can give you hallucinations if you have enough of it, which is why I don't usually. Um, yeah, they eventually said that yeah, it was a combination of something that they weren't familiar with, which was called bath salts. It was new at the time, which is why they hadn't detected it because it didn't resemble anything else. Um, I'll put that up from James. But we have all these different things that we take for our mental disorders and whatnot, and you got to wonder how much of that is messing with our chemistry. Like how much of that is helping us, and how much of that is getting into areas of the brain that aren't very helpful. You know, because it mental health is a pretty fragile thing once you think about it. We all have our little things. We all have our stresses, and some people have more stress than others. We have PTSD from veterans. We have abusive upbringings as a child that we can't seem to get rid of. As an adult, we have a lot of things that are wrong with us. I mean, me included. Um, and that's kind of funny. That's like let me put that up there. That's kind of funny. Because I'm sure they were just like, oh, he's just for your actual bathtub, but I mean, we've all got something kind of going wrong in our brain that we're dealing with on a regular basis, and some people have it worse than others. And so there's medications and all kinds of other stuff, and we don't understand most of what the brain does so far as conscious thought, as far as like all that kind of thing going. We have an idea of how it automates our body. We know about the autonomous nervous system and some various other things. We don't know why we get afraid, why we get happy, why we dream the way we dream. I mean, we have a lot of guesses and a lot of theories. And so there's a lot of drugs out there that are meant to treat conditions that we honestly don't really know what the long-term effects of these drugs are going to be on these conditions, or if they're going to cause other conditions. So that could cause, um, if everybody started taking the same sort of drugs, like there was widespread, like we're all having problems with this. Oh, well, here's the most common drug for that, and the most common thing, and it just starts reducing people into feral savagery. That could be a form of potential zombie apocalypse. That could actually happen. People wouldn't be dead though; they wouldn't be undead, but maybe they'd be partially brain dead because of what the drugs do. Maybe that's just a hypothesis. Now, the most common, though, in most fiction, um, the most common, which put like the last couple of years, the last few years, people started getting like, oh no, about this because of everything that happened. Um, the most common form of zombie apocalypse is from a virus, something that takes over our body, that's transmittable by bite, and we already know. We already know that if something like that were to happen and it actually caused a zombie apocalypse, an outbreak like that, that's like a classic zombie scenario, we wouldn't get out of it very, very well. Not like me and you specifically. I mean, as a species, because the number of poor decisions and the number of screw ups and the number of outright just like lies and nobody knows what they're doing but thinks they do and says they do that happened over the last several years is a pretty clear indicator that nobody's really prepared for it. If a virus driven zombie apocalypse were to go through, that would truly be an apocalypse level event. I think would cause the entire extinction of most of our species. And I don't want to get too deep into that because I had some very strong opinions over the last several years, which I stand by. I don't take back any of it. I 100% believe everything that I said because and I know this sounds taboo sometimes, but I did a lot of research, real research. I didn't just watch YouTube videos. I didn't, go to mainstream media and compare them against each other. I did a lot of digging and a lot of looking. And so I had some very strong opinions of it that I can't get into here because I don't want to jeopardize the way the show is. We're not controversial in that sense here. But I tend to think we would get out of a situation like that pretty poorly. And there's a lot of different media that's explored that. Of course, we've got Resident Evil. Resident Evil had the T virus, which was developed by a shady corporation, by the Umbrella Corporation, and they tested it on animals and people, and it got loose, and it caused most of their zombies were faster. They were the fast-running zombies. They were fast. They were strong. It kills the host, but it enhances the body in a number of different ways and mutates it and things like that. So Resident Evil, at least early on, I don't know how far the series has come with that. Like the last few games have been a little different, and I haven't played them. So, but there's other things like there's a book series. The first book of which is called The Passage. And it's by Justin Cronin. And he wrote a trilogy. The first two were pretty good. The last one was half kind of, but I'll get to that in a minute. But in his story, it's funny after the fact because this came out before all the stuff happened a few years back, or over the last few years. I keep thinking like, oh, it's over and done. It's been years and years ago, but it's only been like a year or two. Honestly, it just seems so long ago already. Now that we've gotten back to relative some form of normal. But in the book, there's an expedition in Bolivia investigating some ruins or something like that, and these scientists get infected. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of this hinges to. A lot of this kind of is based off of that kind of thing. This expedition goes to the Bolivian jungle and they get attacked by these feral bats. Sound familiar? They get attacked by these bats and it infects some of them. And the ones that survive take one or two of the people who were infected and killed. They bundle them up and they take them back to study to find out why the virus did what it does. And they discover that the head scientist who had been infected, who they thought was dead, was actually alive. But they keep him in isolation because he doesn't talk to them. He doesn't, But what they do then is they go and collect inmates who are set for death row already. They collect 12 of them, and they inject them with infusions from the former head scientist, who's now some kind of a creature, to test the effects. Ends up creating a vampire zombie kind of hybrid creature. These beings break out. I don't want to tell the whole story. There's some spoilers in there. But they break out. Turns out that when they attack people, the virus is highly, highly, highly contagious, and everybody that they infect, rather than becoming a higher, like smarter creature like themselves, instead becomes like a slave creature tied to the original. So everyone that if one of them bites 12 people, all 12 people are going to be tied to that one. If the next one bites another 12 people, those 12 are going to be tied to that one. And they're basically just like mindless thralls that are half vampiric, half zombie kind of creatures. And they basically overrun the world and basically cause an apocalypse. So the first book, the first half of it is what happens to lead to the apocalypse. And then the second half of it is like 60 years after the apocalypse, which is pretty interesting. And everybody's basically in survivor camps trying to fight off the creatures that show up and whatnot. So that's a pretty good series. The third book ends up, half of that book is exposition by the former head scientist, who's now a hyper intelligent beast creature, explaining his reasons for everything and the whole background and how everything got started. But he's really arrogant and really unlikable, and not unlikable in a way like, oh, I want to make sure that they defeat the villain in the end. It's kind of unlikable in a way like, I just wish he would stop talking. And he goes on for several chapters, and it derails the entire series, and it's no longer interesting. But whatever. It's called The Passage, Justin Cronin. Now, another thing, and this was done by in multiple forms. There was I Am Legend, there was Omega Man, there was The Last Man on Earth, and then there was the modern retelling of I Am Legend, which we've talked about relatively recently. Where there was like a drug, like it was a cure for cancer. It was a vaccine. It was a vaccine for cancer that was given to people on a widespread basis, and it actually caused them to devolve into these creatures, which was an interesting take. And that's why the last few years were kind of like, the better take your vaccine kind of stuff. But that's all I'm going to say about it. I'm not going to get controversial. I'm just going to mention. And that caused basically the downfall of all civilization. So is it possible that a virus could do this kind of stuff? Maybe. We don't 100% understand viruses either. When you look at what a virus looks like magnified at the smallest scale, it looks like a machine. It looks like a little robot, which is crazy because these things have been around for hundreds of thousands of millions of years. It's not like we suddenly invented viruses. I mean, we might have invented some of them now, wink, wink, but they've been around for such a long time, and they've always kind of looked like this. And it's real interesting that they all, on a cellular level, look robotic to me. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. So is it feasible? I guess on some level, but I don't think it's as plausible as other things. Because the viruses, eventually, without new hosts, they die off. They don't live forever. They can last a long time under the right conditions, like in Arctic ice. There's bacteria and things that can cause viruses and things like that. But once they hit certain temperatures, I mean, the virus from the last few years supposedly could be killed by 20 seconds of hand washing. So I don't know. I don't see that as being as plausible. Potentially, maybe. But if there's going to be a zombie apocalypse scenario, I'm not entirely sure it's going to be from that. But that is the most common one. So it's the one that people see the most. Oh, it's a virus. It travels from host to host. Um, Second most common is, of course, drugs and experiments, something from the government, which is another potentiality. Talked about that at the beginning of the show. Um, the next one, which is an interesting one, um, is from an organism. And there's two different approaches to this. One of them, which was recently in the PlayStation game, I've never played it because I don't own. I own a PlayStation, but not one of the modern ones, one of the older ones. But in the game The Last of Us, which also has a TV show, which I haven't seen, but I've heard it's decent. Um, and that's caused by a fungus called the cordyceps, which is a type of mushroom. Now, this type of fungus is pretty crazy. It's based. I mean, the cordyceps is a real fungus. It's a real thing. The one in The Last of Us, is of course its own made up version of it. But good point, James. And sometimes I feel like that too. Sometimes I'm just looking at stuff. I'm just like, put the phone down, dude. Just smack. Um, that reminds me of that scene in Shaun of the Dead, which was, everybody's like shuffling around in the store and everything, and you think the zombie apocalypse is already there. Um, but the cordyceps, the real life version, infects insects and insect relatives like arthropods and things, and they take over its nervous system with this fungus, and they cause it to do things. Um, Most of the time, they cause it to act in ways that will ensure the spread of its species, the cordyceps, and its own survival. And after it's run its course, after it's released its spores and done enough things, it encompasses the rest of the body and then consumes it for food. And The Last of Us uses this idea as a plot device, in that this fungus takes over humans and turns them into creatures, which is, and I find that to be a little more plausible. I find that to be an idea that could potentially still happen, because we have problems with funguses and with molds and things. Uh, Not like me specifically here, but as far as like in the United States and other parts of the world, we have this black mold that you get if your house is like, if water gets in and you don't clean it up fast enough, it gets into your drywall and things like that, or you can even get on the concrete. And this black mold, it can hide in your house if you don't know where to look for it. If it's not a spot that you knew had a leak or something like that, and the spores can get out throughout the house, and it can make you sick. It can make you mentally weird, like it can give you depression, or give you, anxiety. It can make you angry. Um, and there's all kinds of funguses out there in the world that can do this stuff. I mean, we know about hallucinogenic mushrooms. Um, they can make you see things that aren't there. They can make you feel like you're in tune with the universe, or just have like a weird breakdown. And so we've got stuff like that that's out there in the world. It's real stuff. But you have the ones that can take over insect bodies and cause them to just march around and spread themselves by attacking other insects and other whatever. How plausible is that? I think it's very plausible. Our nervous system is, of course, a lot more sophisticated than an instinct. Whoops, than an insect. But it's not the most sophisticated thing that could ever exist. It's not. I mean, we get sick from viruses. We get sick from all kinds of things that attack our immune system. We've developed our own nerve gases and things. So we know how to affect the nervous system and break it down, basically. So I think it's more plausible that a fungus could do that. Um, but it all depends on the lifespan. It depends on the lifespan, in the temperature, and a lot of other factors, just like viruses. Um, but that, I think, is plausible. That's a potential. Um, Now, the next thing on my list is another interesting one because this is what they used in Dead Island 2. They didn't mention it in the first game. The first game, they said that there was an inherent part of some native tribes' DNA that was resistant to some kind of disease, but also amplified the effects. And then when it was experimented on by these people, it got out of control and turned into a zombie virus. But this could have been just before they understood it. In the second game, they say that there's a molecule or an organism, like a microorganism, that inhabits all animals and plants and everything on the planet that has been developing inside the body for thousands of years with occasional flare-ups, and but at some point it evolves to a point where it basically takes over the body, and once it does that, it kills you and turns you into a zombie. And it's a separate organism, like a nano organism. And as it spreads, it then slowly brings like more and more of itself together to form just this massive fleshy thing that just slowly keeps devouring more and more stuff through osmosis and through absorption and things like that, which is a pretty, interesting and frightening scenario. But how likely is it? We know already about viruses and about things like that, and this could be similar, but it's supposed to be an entirely separate class of organism rather than a virus. Is it possible for something like that to be hidden in our DNA, hidden in our bodies somewhere, and we not know it? I guess so, but that's pretty similar to the cordyceps idea already, and I tend to think that's more of a storytelling thing. I don't think that there's some hidden evolutionary clock sitting in our body ready to erupt and turn us all into monsters. I don't think. I mean, it could happen, but that seems more fictional than anything else. Let's see if I have an article. I got a whole bunch of articles about different things. No, I don't. I don't have an article for that. But I thought it was an interesting take, at least. I thought it was an interesting idea that a microorganism could cause that kind of thing. Because if you take that a little further, if you take that and instead of think of it as something that's here, that's a native to the planet, you could think of, well, what if it's something extraterrestrial? What if it's an infection, not of a sickness, but of a extraterrestrial organism that's designed to change us, which is also from Dead Space. The Dead Space series has a very similar thing. It uses these beacons called the markers to transmit something. It's never fully explained how the molecules got into the first people initially. Like there's one point in Dead Space 3 where you go into a planet of an much older alien species that was infected, but then that system got quarantined and nobody went there. But somehow something happened with the markers and was able to alter people's DNA. So what was it? Was it activated by touch? Was it activated by air, breathing, that kind of thing? It's never fully adequately explained now that I think about it. But it's some kind of organism that gets into your body and kills you and then changes you and causes you to mutate to different things. Man, my nose is just itching like crazy. And so I think that's a bit, because I'm more of a believer in the whole like ancient astronaut thing and the whole potential of extraterrestrials. I think that's possible. That's a possibility. Would they use that on the planet? Yep, Plan 9 from Outer Space. Also, Hmm. Good classic movie too. Hilarious, but a good classic. Um, would an alien species knowingly infect us that way? Maybe, but why? Because if it turned us all into aggressive killing machines, are they themselves aggressive killing machines and they just want more of themselves? Is that their base? Um, is that their base life part of their life cycle? Like, are they initially like a similar to a virus, and then we bolster their ranks, or is it that it's used as a cleansing measure where it'll take care of us, get rid of all of us, and then once we've all turned into these monsters, then we'll eventually fall apart because we won't have any food left, or we'll eat each other or something. Who knows? It seems kind of inefficient to me. Um, could it be inadvertent? Maybe, because while you have Plan 9 from Outer Space, we also have a movie called District 9, which I saw some years ago, which showed an alien species arrive in orbit around Earth, and it's actually full of sickly, half dead aliens rather than an invasion force. And so they put them in their own ghetto, basically, on Earth and treat them like third class citizens or worse. But one of them gets into a fight with like an activist who's there to try to, work out, or no, he's from the UN or something like that, trying to figure out about rights and prevent like terrorist attacks and something. It's been a long time since I watched it. And he gets into a fight and something happens. Either one of them bites him or something, and he eventually becomes one of the creatures. Not on purpose. It's just something that happens. They spread their species by infecting other creatures. And there's a species from Star Trek that's actually like that too, which is interesting. It's in Star Trek Online, but it's also in one of the shows. I don't remember which one. Probably Voyager. The Kabali, or what they do is um, they take the dead of other species and they inject their own, like, some kind of part of their physiology, some DNA that overwrites the dead person's physiology, basically brings them back to life as a new Kabali with a new identity and everything, which is morbid and interesting. And there's jokes at their expense. Like, there's points where you're in battle with them and you tell them, hey, if anybody's wounded and everybody's killed, don't turn them into Kabali. It's like, okay. But it's interesting because just like the brain, we don't know enough about how our bodies actually function. We know a lot, but we're always coming up with new medications and new vaccines that might fix one thing, but break three or four other things because we don't understand enough about how all this stuff works. So, could something like that happen? Potentially. I still think the most likely scenario is something like the cordyceps. But could a microorganism change us into zombie apocalypse? Possibly. Again, possibly. Hard maybe. Just like the virus, hard maybe. Um, if something like that were to happen, how prepared are we to deal with it? As I started the show with, I don't think very. I don't think we're very prepared for it. We've shown that we don't know how to deal with viruses. It's my personal opinion, without getting into too much detail, that most of the response to the virus from the last few years was not correct, made things worse on a number of levels, which maybe that was the point. If you get into conspiracy um, territory, um, But I think the people in charge of that kind of stuff aren't gonna do it. Um, and James, I'm kind of on the same token as you. I don't have like I don't I'm not I wouldn't call myself a survivalist. I don't get into, a lot of those details, but I do think I would be a bit more prepared than some others, and I think that's what it would come down to. I don't think you would be able to rely on any of the central structures at all. Because right now you can't anyway. Like seriously, can you really who honestly feels like they can trust any part of the current federal government right now or any other parts of the governments of the world because they've all been pretty lackluster for a number of years if you've been paying attention. Um, and individually, I think a lot of individual people would do very well. I think if we had like the plan, and you had the supplies, or if you knew how to get the supplies, that's another thing too. If you know how to get the supplies, you don't need to necessarily have as many to start off with, because when you start off with a bunch of things, it's very heavy. If you need to be on the move, um, which that goes into another aspect of it. Will you shelter in place, or do you keep it moving, keep on the go? A smart move that I've seen in a few bits of zombie related media is to go someplace that would make it difficult for something to move around after you, like either a height that's very high up, um, which is not necessarily as feasible because you have to go down to get more supplies and things like that, and it's has its own hazards. Or go someplace very cold, because the cold, no matter how superhuman the muscles are as far as animation, they can only go so far while they're cold. Kind of like numbs them and ices them down and makes them heavier. It's easier to outrun something that's cold than something that's warm. Um, there you go. Um, and none of that is really a bad thing. I'm not going to say anything bad about any of that. The other, like I said, the other thing would be go someplace cold, like maybe move up into Canada or Alaska or something like that. But you also have to make sure that you can survive there as well. You don't want to get somewhere too cold. And the other thing is, how many people are you going to take with you? Are you going to take just your immediate family? Are you going to try to save as many people as possible? The problem with this kind of thing that always turns in, it always shows up in fiction, is that the more people concentrated in an area, the more of a target they become. But again, the smaller groups are easier to pick off. So it just depends. Like it's a rough series of choices. I think having a smaller group, honestly, is really the way to go. I can understand the appeal of having a large group, a large, you know, minor civilization. But the more people you have, that's the less you can move. If you have a certain number of people, eventually you have to stop and you have to stay put. And staying put, I think, would be problematic. Um, I think if it's going to be anything, it's going to be you and your immediate family, or you alone. Honestly, there's almost no other way to do it. Because you also don't want to endanger other people. Like if you have a larger group that you're trying to lead around, you're making them a target again. I think personally. Um, and of course, this is all theoretical, and we can talk about it all night. And who knows? Who knows what would actually happen? I tend to think I do relatively well. I'm not the fastest person, I'm not the strongest person, but I have a good idea of where to go, how to get around places, how to move at a moment's notice, and things like that. I can think relatively well on my feet if I need to, and I think that's one of the most important skills you would need. I mean, that can't get you out of everything. You're still going to need some way to defend yourself. You still need actual ways to get the food and whatnot. But I think I would do okay for at least a little while. Who knows? I might be overestimating my chances. And So that's what I think. And I've kind of got a connection to this kind of stuff. I talked about it on the audio podcast, on the Let's Talk About This podcast, which is currently um, on hold for a month as I transition to season 2. So you can listen to all 20 episodes of season 1 on Spotify, YouTube, etc. But I had an episode about dreams, and I bring that up because I have had, and actually I had a new one not long ago. I don't know if it was connected to the other ones or if it's just because I'd been playing so many zombie games lately. But I've had a recurring theme in multiple dreams over a number of years about basically the aftermath of a zombie apocalypse and dealing with the apocalypse and moving around. And in those dreams, it's interesting. I travel by myself. I do travel by myself. I don't travel with other groups. I sometimes visit other groups of people. I check in with other groups of people, but I don't stay. I don't stick around. I keep moving. Um, and that I think that's an interesting point. I think that's it's something in my brain about self-reliance and whatnot. Maybe the latest one I had. I don't remember all the details because that's how dreams are. But I remember a part that stuck out. I was going. Um, I was on the West Coast for some reason, and some of these are chronological. Like some of these are like one leads to the other, and some of them are out of order. So I'm not sure what the entire timeline of all this is, where it fits with the other ones. But I was somewhere on the West Coast, like in California or something like that, and I was telling somebody that the entire East Coast was just all zombies, which was interesting. The entire East Coast, and you would think that the West Coast, because the most high population centers are generally on the coasts. That's where the biggest cities are generally on the east and west sides. Um, but and I was telling somebody that, and that's the most I remember from it. Although I do remember that there were a few. No, what it was I was leaving the East Coast, and I went to the West Coast, and I told them, yeah, the East Coast is overrun with zombies. Um, but there was another dream that I'd had previous to that where I was in the Pacific Northwest in like Olympia and stuff like that, where vast tracts of forests where it had already happened and I was on the move and things like that. And I remember that one because Rob was in it with a guy who was supposed to be his uncle but looked like his dad. And they gave me a car to get out of the area because they were staying for whatever reason, but they knew I had to leave, so they gave me a car. It was like a 90s Mustang, which is a car I hate. I don't like Mustangs at all. I don't like them. Um, Blasphemy, maybe. But they gave me this like 90s Mustang and said, here, you need this. You got to, move on. So interesting stuff. And I'm sure I'll have more. I don't know if it's just a fixation on this kind of stuff that's stuck in my brain, or if it's alternate universe, like slipping back and forth, like this is what would have happened, wherever. But they're interesting. I don't usually feel afraid in the dreams. It's always like they're not nightmares; they're just events that happen and scenarios that happen. But yeah, zombie apocalypse. On the level of apocalypses, I don't think it is the most likely extinction event that could possibly happen. The most likely, I think, would probably be an asteroid, because there's all kinds of asteroids out there, and there's always a chance one's going to smack us, and then it's going to be it. Total alteration of the climate, the landscape, everything, take out most everybody. I still think we as a species would survive on some level. I don't think it'd be anywhere close to what it's at now, but I think that kind of thing has happened before, and I think it will happen again. I don't think we as a species will ever be properly, completely wiped out unless we do it ourselves, like in On the Beach with a nuclear fallout that's worldwide where you can't escape the radiation wherever you go. or if the entire planet is scorched down to the dirt by like a solar flare or a supernova or something, which none of that is really likely to happen anytime soon that we know of. But asteroid, maybe. Asteroid could happen. Zombie apocalypse, slightly lower on the totem pole from there, I think. It's an interesting thought experiment, though, which is always something I like to say. An interesting thought experiment, because I like to think about this kind of stuff. I get into my game playing and I start thinking, like, what about real life? What about this kind of stuff? And yeah, I think that's potential. As far as a virus goes, I think it's more likely that if a virus were going to kill us off, it'd be just over and done. I don't think it would actually reanimate anybody. I think if there was a killer virus that actually did the job, I think it would just kill everybody and be done. And that'd be it. Like bubonic plague kind of thing, Black Death kind of stuff, just on an order of magnitude bigger. That's what I think. Um, Climate change, potentially, maybe. Just looking out my window, seeing about the traffic driving through. Um, the climate changing to such a point that it's unsustainable. But I still think we might have ways to deal with that. We could move underground. As much as it's difficult, I think it would be possible. Um, what other kind of apocalypses are there? If an alien civilization shows up and kills us all off, you know, that's kind of getting far out there, potentially. But yeah, a zombie apocalypse could, I think, under the right circumstances, happen. But I think it'd be more like, without necessarily like the way the Last of Us was, it had like strange creatures and things like that. I think it'd be more like just the thing hijacks our nervous system and it goes to town and then that's it. I don't think it'd be particularly monstrous. I think it would be mostly like ourselves, but just no ability to think of ourselves anymore, entirely run by the needs of the fungus, and that'd be that. That's what I think anyway. So I hope you folks enjoyed my discussion tonight. I always try to think about things that we don't usually get into on the show. We have a lot of things that we cover multiple times. Like I know Rob is big on the whole Giants aspect, and I don't want to talk bad about that. That's like his baby, so we talk about that a lot. But I like to get into more of the like fantastical kind of stuff. More of the would it really happen? Maybe not, but it's fun to think about it. Um, and like the cryptid stuff, and I like to get more into that kind of thing. And you guys know that. But so what do we have going on for from here on out? Um, Today, of course, is Friday, so tomorrow is Saturday. I have another episode of the Saturday Spiritualist. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about yet. I was getting pretty good about having my topics arranged ahead of time for that, and then I kind of ran into like, oh, what's next? And I remember I said that was going to be a limited series. It wasn't going to be something I was going to continue forever, but I am going to try to do at least a few more episodes before I put a pause on it. And I'm not sure what I'm going to get into next. I might get into herbs, which I don't honestly know too much about. I would have to do a lot more research on that. Or I might get into stones, which I only kind of peripherally know about. I don't know. I don't know about that stuff as much. So maybe I should do some of those kind of things to teach myself as much as I can teach you guys. I don't know. So Saturday it'll be something on the Saturday Spiritualist. Sunday's a free day. Monday is a free day right now because, of course, Let's Talk About This is on a month break while I'm preparing for season 2. So you won't see me on Monday, but that shouldn't stop you from going to Spotify and listening to episodes of Let's Talk About This. My last episode, episode 20, was with Rob, and we talked about sports and we talked about the Olympics and all that good stuff. Um, I'm not a big fan, but that's a good point about that show is bringing people who are fans of these things and talking about them. Tuesday is another Twitch Tuesday. I'll probably play a game of some kind. Wednesday, I don't have anything planned, but Rob may be doing his streaming. Thursday is the Uncanny Spirits Club, and Friday, Rob will be back for another episode of This Uncanny Earth. So I think that about covers everything. We only got a couple minutes left. And one thing, too, is you folks can always submit your own topics. I can't guarantee we'll always get to them right off the bat, but you can always submit them. You can either mention them during one of these episodes because they'll show up in the comments and we can recheck it later if we miss it, or you can go to This Uncanny Earth official, the Facebook group, and you can submit them there as a public comment, and we will definitely see that and we'll look into it. Because I'm always on to. Oh yeah, and that's a big thing too. I know Rob mentioned it, and we were going to talk about it, and we just haven't scheduled anything for it yet. I don't know if maybe he's just been busy or what it was, because he usually handles the topics and things. It's this is Rob's, like I said, it's Rob's baby, and I let him usually do the deciding on that kind of stuff. But yeah, the UFO whistleblower and that kind of stuff. It's an interesting situation. I'm kind of on the fence about how I feel about all that, and I might suggest it to him to see if we can discuss that for when he gets back, because that might be a good topic. Because there's been a lot of UFO stuff going around. They've even been re-examining some other things, like that thing that they thought was an asteroid or whatever it was that passed through the system. That I don't know how to say it. That object that passed through. They've been re-examining that. A lot of exciting stuff for UFO enthusiasts, and I'm interested. I've been following along. I just haven't made a bunch of notes about it yet. So, but I think I'll suggest it to Rob and see if we can do a show on that, because I know he wanted to. And I don't want to get too far away from the hype for the whistleblower and things like that. So yeah, yeah. That's basically that's me trying to pronounce it. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Whatever it is. But that's it. That's all I've got for you. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. As always, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends all about the show, and try to get us as many subscribers as possible, both on this channel and also on the Spider Does Things channel. And we would definitely appreciate all of the support. Every little bit helps. As soon as we hit a certain threshold, I don't remember what the number is. I think it's like 1,000 subscribers or some ridiculous number. If we ever get to a certain number like that, then we can start getting monetized from YouTube, which it's not a huge deal, but it would be nice. Get a little bit of a kickback without you guys having to I'll donate $5 and stuff. Hey, this takes it right out of having to put it in your hands and puts it on YouTube and say, hey, you giant corporation, pay me some money. Free market. But that's all. Thanks again, and I will catch everybody next time.